And a few miles from Brighton, on Britain's south coast, is Wilton Park, a beautiful old English country house. Wilton Park is a very special conference centre, for it's one of Britain's contributions to the formation of an informed international public opinion.
I'm Holger Nehring. I work at the University of Stirling as a contemporary historian. I'm just going to pause. There were two reasons why Wilton Park was founded. One was a growing realization in the UK during the Second World War that one had to re-educate prisoners of war already during the war. And then that leads to the second reason, which was to build a democratic Germany after the war against National Socialism. So the first bit of context that matters for the origins of Wilton Park is the move away from a focus on the complete destruction of Germany and a move towards reconstruction. And that's obviously when education began to matter, propaganda began to matter more. That's kind of the first context. And that already happened under Winston Churchill's wartime government. The Labour government that came into power after the Second World War had a particular interest in working with German Social Democrats to rebuild Germany, because German Social Democrats had especially suffered from National Socialism. Many had been in exile in Britain, in London, during the Second World War. This moment of 1945 in the creation of Wilton Park, where many people said, don't do it. Don't collaborate in a sense with Nazis. Don't create a nice, as some of the locals called it at the time, nice hotel for the German war criminals. But the British government went ahead with it anyway. So the main ethos of these re-education classes for the prisoners of war was that the prisoners were supposed to learn how to think and to argue their case in a debate. So it wasn't built around necessarily achieving a consensus, but it was essentially trying to get the prisoners to reach the conclusions through rational methods rather than just an imposition and indoctrination. That was the general idea. So the really interesting thing about the key players is that this is not just a British story. So one key player was a Bavarian baron, Waldemar von Knöringen, who was staying in the UK as part of his, because he had to flee Germany during the Second World War. And he was then posted to North Africa as Britain was fighting the German troops there. And once they'd been defeated, Knöringen was charged with debriefing some of the embassy and consular staff there to translate some of the paperwork and to also do some kind of radio propaganda. And that then led to some more serious thinking on Knöringen's part about founding what he called prisoner of war university. This is one strand that led into Wilton Park out of basically war propaganda. The other strand was more of a foreign policy track, and this had to do with rebuilding Germany, and that also involved a German national, originally a German national, Heinz Köppler. Heinz Köppler became the first warden of Wilton Park, or the first director of Wilton Park. And he then worked during the Second World War in the Foreign Office as part of the Political Intelligence Department. And as part of that, he then began thinking about how can we create the conditions for a democratic Germany. And again, we don't quite know whether he knew von Knöringen, but basically those two efforts overlapped at the time. And then that led to the foundation of Wilton Park. Memos were written, and then this was set up. But what made Wilton Park special was this kind of focus on education. What was important was these ideas that are summarized under the heading of liberal internationalism. And that basically meant that you had to have firm international organizations, but also backed up by an educated public and educated diplomacies. I think a key lesson of Wilton Park's history is that the future is not predictable. I think if you had asked the policy makers in 1945 about the endurance of Wilton Park as an organization, or even the kind of impact that it had, they wouldn't have been able to tell you that. And I think that's really important because it shows that progress and impact cannot be fully planned. The amazing thing is that actually Britain spent money on running Wilton Park at a time, so directly after the Second World War, when money was very, very scarce and when the situation was very challenging. And I think that's a really important lesson for continued government involvement in the kind of things that Wilton Park does, the sort of educational mission, network building, and soft power. Because soft power is very difficult to measure, and therefore it's very easy to cut in a way, because you can't measure it with key performance indicators. You can measure attendance at events. You can, to some extent, measure what people think about the events, but the real impact might sometimes be 10, 15, 20 years hence, rather than immediate. And I think that's another important historical lesson, that change happens over longer periods of time and not just over parliamentary periods or even budget periods.
Why do you think it's unique to Britain?
And the thing that makes this whole thing work, it seems to me, is the fact that people do understand that they're speaking as individuals, and even when the government official comes down, he might express the government point of view, he might express his own point of view. And I think that's the thing that is so unique about it. I think they're very unique.
The future of democracy depends on a well-informed public opinion. And Wilton Park is a unique contribution by Britain to provide such an informed public opinion in all the countries of the West.